years. We are about to close 2024 and make our way into the year of 2025, which is going to be a very exciting year for all of us. We're very much expecting a lot of new things here at MFP, and our goals for you, especially as a community, is to continue to think about how you're going to expand your horizons. That's not just within the physical gym, because really that's our bigger mission statement, is to really think about who we are as human beings, not just within our physical bodies and our health, but how we connect, and also how we start to look at our life with a little bit more passion and excitement. So let's take our 3 breaths, we'll get into it, and we'll dare to be different. That's the theme. So in your space here, as we start to, throughout this podcast, begin to reflect for this past year, just bring your awareness to the gratitude that you had for all the experiences in 2024. Even the experiences that were the most challenging, even the experiences that caused grief, challenge, adversity, sadness, discomfort. And try to open yourself up to those experiences with compassion, acceptance, and just surrender that it all is happening for a reason. And the more you surrender to that path, the more things are going to continue to open up for you with a very exciting year. So take your first breath, deep inhale. Hold. Control it out. Next rep. Slow exhale. Last rep. 3, 2, and let it out. All right, quote it up.
All right, so I have a short one from Tim Ferriss that says, "Don't lie to yourself and think that when staying within your comfort zone, things will magically be okay." So brief one, but kind of a lot to think about, especially, as we transition into our New Year conversation today. A lot of people like will start a new year, start some new milestone, and they want to be different. They want to be better. But how many people are actually willing to change and get out of their comfort zone and do things truly differently? And it's really scary to do that. Staying in your comfort zone is by far just the easiest thing you could do in life. And getting out of it it's both the scariest thing you could do and most rewarding thing you could do. And I really have found that when you get out of your comfort zone, that's when things really shape out the way that they're meant to, they're supposed to, and you kind of find your path as opposed to just staying in that box,
And that's really the ground level idea of how you came up with the idea of, in our newsletter, this whole idea of dare to be different, right? It's just simply being open to try taking a next step for you in a way that maybe you didn't think, maybe something that is going to make you a little bit more uncomfortable, or maybe even change your perspective. And so when I came up with the acronym for D.A.R.E, it's Dream About Reality Expanded, and the big word with that is expansion.
Yeah.
Now the whole ground level idea is just to grow, right? Continue to learn and develop and try new things, but the idea of expansion is also a very deeper sense of this is how the universe operates. It's all about expansion and contraction, even on a cellular level. Our blood cell, our veins and our blood cells and our cellular level, everything expands, it contracts, expands and it contracts. And every time it contracts, it expands even greater and even greater. So expansion from a soul level, that's what everything wants to do. Your soul and your whole being really wants to grow, evolve, expand, expand, expand. And expansion is really difficult because it's going to be met with that polarity of contraction or challenge or adversity, or something that's going to kind of pull you in and get you into that comfort zone, and really this fear that a lot of us face. And so, the whole idea for you guys is with this episode and this podcast is to help you maybe navigate, like, how do I really start to get into this notion of expansion? How do I get into this ability within my physical self, my emotional self, my mental self, and my spiritual self to want to, get into these new endeavors in your life? And we're going to really encourage you to do that, right? It's going to be easy for you to just keep your simple routine, keep your normal things in your life. And so how does that look? And so with every new year, right, we all know the whole idea of, new year, new me, which is good. Like, we want people, like, I think that typically we as a society will look at that as like, we'll roll our eyes. Like, we're typically used to that in the physical training world because we see it, right?
Yeah.
We see people come in and they don't commit and then they leave because they get all excited and then they try it for a few days and then they just collapse. But it is good to have passion and excitement and to want to try something new. Like, we want to have that mindset. So the bigger thing for you is, how do we start to create accountability systems? How do we start to create a system of commitment to actually stick to what these, goals, we can call them, or just manifestations or creations, or really anything, if you kind of, again, trust and surrender that things will actually come your way this next year.
Yeah, and I think I also agree that, like, it is a good thing to be excited about a new year. Like, it is a good thing to make New Year's resolutions and be excited about new opportunities. But one thing I find that people do that kind of negatively affects them is they really are only thinking about 2025, but, you should be thinking, like, okay, this is the beginning of my next 10 years. Like, how does this next step factor into the year after, the year after, the year after? Like, if you really want to play the long game, like, making a New Year's resolution is great, but it's also, or like having an idea for how you want to grow is great, but it can't just be for 1 year. It has to be for something more than that.
Yeah. And it's okay to not have the answer for those next 10 years, but subconsciously, that's a great thing to have. Like, you're thinking about longevity and sustainability. And to help you guys figure this out, we're going to re-review what manifestation is, because we talked about this in the previous podcast. And actually, the biggest part with manifesting, creating, or developing, goals or rituals or whatever you want to do is you got to start into this present here and now moment. So the idea of, like, awareness. Are we being conscious to reflect? So, like, literally reflect on this present moment in time of what brought you here. And if you kind of look on the past year or years or whatever, you can start to navigate, those things we talked in the past podcast. It was about, what I'm doing in this moment in time making me a better human? How bad do I want to feel good? Is it serving myself in terms of, like, how I view myself and self-love? Is it allowing me to have the opportunity to create positive service to others? And is it allowing me to connect to all life? And those are usually really good things to start being aware of, or like all my habits and things I've been developing, allowing me to expand myself consciously and aware so that I can reflect to then start creating an experience. Yeah. So that's the next steps. We have awareness and reflection, then we have creating an experience. And out of that experience, that could be, what you decide you want to do. And out of that experience, we create feedback. So you have a big part of that experience that's going to give you, an idea of, like, what you're achieving or going to achieve. But the biggest part of this manifestation is, after you get feedback, you got to integrate what you learn from that experience. You can't necessarily just give up on it. You have to actually have the tools to integrate, meaning put what you learn and apply it, and then that's going to allow you to go through this continuing evolution. So awareness, reflection, experience, feedback, integration, evolution, and you keep going through that cycle. It's a circle. It's not a straight line. So the circle of life, the circle of how, God and the universe and all these things are starting to align things from a much deeper level, but start from there is, like, reflect, analyze, and expand your consciousness.
Yeah, and integration's always, like, that's always the hardest part, And I always, sometimes like I mean, you might have an answer for this, but I always like wonder why that is. Cause like, you know, you go through these experiences and you feel like you notice something and you make these like downloads and you get these like certain ideas of like, okay, this is how I need to live. Like the universe shows you stuff, but then like, it is hard to put into practice. And like, that is something that like I've experienced. And part of it I think is like fear, but a lot of it is just, you know, habits. Like it's so hard to create new habits and really change our like fundamental behaviors, because that's what it's really all about.
Well, yeah, it's because you have this primal thing called your nervous system in your brain, and that's, again, not the true you. It's just a mechanism. It's your hard drive that, again, we talked about how it takes in every little bits and pieces of information through your five senses, and that's trying to create this ego version of yourself that's going to create habits and behaviors. And sometimes we are conditioned into things, even though we know deep down, right, the downloads are saying like, this isn't serving me. You know, I'm going through these habits and things, or projecting myself in a way that, you know, and truly that doesn't want to be you. So yeah, the question is like, how do we integrate? And we'll get into that. So the idea of like D.A.R.E is like projecting your reality, like dreaming about your reality. And even, this is a very simple thing, but Matthias shared this in our Friday sharing. He was just talking about, shout out to Matthias, you've been a great member, tardy talent. He shows up and always late, but you show up, right? And he just talked about like how this past year, out of all other past years, like he actually took time to do a reflection and journal. He just decided to have this idea to contemplate and just write what he wants to achieve in his life within this upcoming year. And that's a great practice. It's very simple, very ground level, and it's just you putting into action through thought form into a physical, tangible, kinesthetic form of writing of what is coming through you, through your passions and your excitements, and what's going to ideally give you purpose. And so when you start to write those things out, you're just getting that first step in, right? And then we're going to talk about like actually how we develop relationships, and then we create this actual ability to create long-term sustainable habits through like neuroplasticity and neuroscience and all those things. So as you start to maybe project, you know, like you can even speak it out to existence. It doesn't have to be journaling, like you just speak it out. Or, you know, what I usually practice is just being in solitude and meditation and repeating through mantra, excuse me, of what I am ideally trying to achieve. But something for me that's been hard is journaling, and something that I've practiced has been really helpful. And so now we start to project, right? Now we start to project and get experiences, get feedback, and then we have to, again, take with everything that I'm doing and I have to integrate it. So I start with the 4 C's, and these are the 4 C's within my shaman's poem, or my shaman's way of being, and it's courage, curiosity, connection, and commitment. So courage really is just the idea of, you know, willpower and resilience. Like, are you willing to, like I say, break the norm or go against the grain, and like really have this mental mindset of like pushing yourself to do what you're going to do. Second is curiosity, which is like you kind of almost have to forget everything you think you know, because in reality, when we start to go down this path of manifestation, not everything's going to line up perfectly. Like you're going to have something that's going to cause an obstacle or cause you to rethink your process. It's going to maybe even make you feel like you get a setback. It's going to make you feel challenged in where you're not having growth. So curiosity is really about sitting with that experience of challenge and going like, okay, I'm feeling this challenge, I'm going through this adversity, like why am I going through that? How do I sit with that? How do I actually experience that challenge to allow me to forget everything that I thought I knew so I could start a new path and avenue to continue the process? The third is connection. And so a really big part of integration is not being by yourself. Like you really have to have, you know, a support group, support circles, accountability. I mean, myself included, everybody. Like accountability comes from all levels. For me, it's like my higher self I go to, like my spirit, but like I also need physical people around and other groups that are going to allow you to connect with, to make deeper, meaningful connections, to accelerate your growth, or to keep you on track and on your path. And that's how we start making, soul contracts or gatherings or groups and communities, just like you guys do here at the gym, the people you see in your classes. And then the fourth is commitment. And commitment, again, you think about like longevity and sustainability that you were talking about, but commitment is actually like just remembering that there's the here and now moment in time. Like commit to being in the moment of your process and don't get caught up in the past. Don't get, caught up in the future. Just allow everything to be and trust and surrender in that moment of that path, as long as you're acting on the courage and the passion, the curiosity, and the connection and accountability. And so if you can start integrating those 4 C's into whatever you're starting to project or to manifest or write down, then you're going to start to see habits form and your ability to maintain whatever you're going to try to go for within this next year.
Yeah, and like obviously the biggest part too is like knowing yourself and doing enough self-reflection to really understand like where you do need to change. And like that's step 1. And then like as you go through these 4 C's like of integration, I think all of it, like once you actually put into action, like I love that Matthias share, because like the act of actually like doing something different, like even if it's something small, it doesn't have to be like, this crazy new behavior, just like doing something different than you used to do it.
Yeah.
And doing something new is so powerful. And yeah, the community aspect, like, is the best. Like that's what makes it special. Cause like, it's so easy to feel isolated, especially when you're like going through self-reflective processes. I mean, I remember even on like one of your men's weekends, Bill was with us and he was like, I can't believe like you guys seem like the most normal dudes ever. I can't believe you guys struggle with this stuff. I'm like, everybody does. And like having that sense of community, because it's so easy to feel like isolated, and then realize like everybody's in such a similar position, fighting a similar battle, just trying find ways to grow. It really just helps you really take that step of actually putting into action, which is like the hardest, but the most like I was saying before with integration, like it's the hardest one to do, but it's the one that is the most important.
Yeah. And, just to clarify for you guys, Joe, you're a good example of, the D.A.R.E for, everything you've done this past year. And when you talked about the men's retreat, we're talking particularly about doing medicine work with psilocybin. And Joe was a classic example of like somebody who had all the fear. We'll talk about like relationships here in a second, and like, yeah, there's a lot of valid things to be afraid of, to even try, even though you know and hear and see, data and science that like some of these things that you might dare to try are good for you, but like there's a resistance to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have resistance to a lot of things because, a lot of us probably think we get comfortable, right? We think we don't need to try new things, even though at a soul level, like this is part of like how we're supposed to continue to develop our human experience. But for you, your resistance and your fear, you're like, I don't want to do it. I'm not. And you eventually came over this hump of starting to reframe, how you're going to develop this relationship to a substance, to have a clear intention, right? Your reflection and awareness of like how you want it to grow as a human being. And you've done a lot. You just did your cold plunge, which we'll talk about in a second.
Oh yeah.
With, your past daily December. But I want to transition that into this idea of relationships, because I think this is going to be really big for you, because again, you guys are going to formulate, and you should, right? We all should start thinking about, what are something that I need to work on that's going to serve me a little bit better in my life. And we all have that thing. And if you start with the 4 pillars, I'll talk about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Like there's 4 pillars that we can start to pick one of these pillars or a few and some things I can work from. And it's going to start with developing a relationship to yourself, others, and all life. And so I have an acronym, it's DC, DECE. It doesn't really actually say anything, but when it comes to developing relationships with substances, others, all life, or whatever you're doing, there's dependency, escapism, connection, and expansion. And so what do I mean by this? Basically, this is not a timeline, but a diagram of consciousness from low-level awareness to high-level awareness, primal to soul, and everything in between. So when we start to create, for example, we'll start with like fitness, right? I have a dependency of fitness because you're coming in here maybe not even aware that you're just going through the motions, right? It's a very primal sense, but you're just here because your nervous system and your brain is just knowing that it needs something to be in the space. Whereas I go to escapism, like sometimes you're having some sort of awareness, but there's no clear intention for growth. You're just in to just be in because it's something that you feel like you need to do, or I'm trying to make myself feel better. I'm trying to escape a reality of problems that I need to actually face within my health. And then once we start going into connection of my relationship to fitness, I'm actually coming in here to be fully aware that I know I have something to face, but I'm doing this and I'm aware, I'm consciously thinking through thought that I'm serving myself on a greater level that's not just like improving my biological and physiological markers. Like I'm actually trying to create a connection through my fitness. And then the last would be expansion, where it's not about the physical health or physical body. Like me moving my body is allowing me to express myself in a far greater way that is integrating into other forms of my health, the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. So that's a way we can think about a relationship to a goal or something you want to do. One way I kind of like to think about that too is like, again, dependency is like a primal or physical response. The escapism is more of like a fear or an emotional response. Like you're coming into the gym because you're afraid of your life and your health outside, right? There's a fear response of being in here because you're trying to escape the health problems that you have outside. Not saying that's a bad thing at all with this, at least, relationship. The connection is more of like a heart openness to this, and again, the expansion is more of like a higher purpose soul level. So one last example I'll give you guys to help doing this, and this is actually something I really wanted to talk on since I'm wearing a Fueling Fitness Nutrition shirt, and we talk about developing relationships like you did with the retreat with medicine work, is alcohol, right? So we're all going to have to think about this every year and every month, every day, is like how we have a relationship to our food, because nutrition is extremely important for all parts of our health and our energy and our life force. And we need to think about like how we're going to develop relationships to substances. Now, when it comes to substances, like some substances are not even going to go all the way from dependency to expansion. Like some are just going to be dependency and escapism, and some are just going to be connection and expansion. So, for example, alcohol is purely dependency and escapism. Maybe I'll talk about how it could be slightly for connection, and probably not even a chance for expansion. Whereas psychedelics, they're more about connection and expansion, even though they could fall toward the other half if there's not the right preparation. So alcohol, right? Dependency could literally, not even think about like how an alcoholic forms where they just like depend on alcohol to like function. It could be like you just going out to the bar and everybody else is doing it, so you just have a drink without really any awareness of like thinking about like why I'm taking a drink. I'm just gonna drink around everybody because everybody else is doing it, which is a form of you depending on your ability to fit in out of fear, right? Of this primal sense of just like being in the physical space. Whereas escapism for alcohol, which a lot of people do, is there's an emotional bond to it because they're trying to numb a certain area of their life to think that they're having fun, but there could be subconscious thoughts around alcohol where like it's actually bringing your consciousness down energetically, which it does, and there's obviously no health benefits to alcohol. Now, there could be the idea of connection of like opening yourself. For example, like I thought of like people who are winery people, right? You have someone like Dick Vermeil that has he has a whole farm of grapes and wines and all those things. Shout out to Dick Vermeil, Eagles coach in the past. You guys should all know him. Chiefs coach as well.
Yeah, I have a theory on sommeliers, and it's that you
Is
should.
that what they're called?
Well, sommelier is the person that if you're at doing a wine tasting, they're the person who comes and tells you about the wine.
Okay.
And I believe that everything they say is a lie. I'm like, don't. Whenever they come to our table, I'll tell. I'm like, don't listen to a word that he says. This was in the fiery volcano soil from Pompeii. I'm like, no, it's not. It's you should be getting nodes of everything they say. They're actors, and I'm like,
okay.
No,
I don't know with these
sommelier. It's actually
sommeliers.
really challenging to become a sommelier. You can only take the test once, apparently. But
I had no idea.
Don't believe a word that they say.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Well, the people that at least create, who knows their intention, but if there is a deeper openness and connection to, the nature process of developing the, brewery or winery or whatever, that could have a deeper sense in terms of openness. And there could be expansion with giving those people a purpose of creating, a business or things like that. But
I actually have a good example of that.
Okay. Well, just going back to that, I'll get your example is the substance itself, though, when using it, you're never really going to, the openness and the heart, if I want to drink to go be out with my friends and be more social, that's actually more escapism. You're having an emotional fear of not fitting in and being authentic in who you are. So where it comes to other substances like psychedelics, for example, when we use these for a very intentional purpose, it's more about opening myself from a heart connection to knowing who I am and how can I expand who I am, integrate who I am, which is my soul, out into my life, and having these steps and things in alignment for me to actually do that, to be my best self.
Yeah, when you talk about ways that you could be in expansion mode with something like alcohol or substances, alcohol specifically, I think of Aruba, where Nora's family's from, is total desert, and you can't grow anything there. Growing grapes there for wine seems impossible. But they recently this one group built a vineyard super innovative, finding ways to just bring new life and culture to Aruba. Super cool, just super innovative the way that they did an irrigation system for water and recycling rainwater and ocean water. But stuff like that is really cool because it's really being a creator, doing something different. But there are limited relationships you can have like that. I think another very simple example is just the idea of travel. Are you traveling to escape? I think travel's great. I think vacations are great. You need time. Go on vacation, but go on vacation to really connect. Go on vacation to expand. And you're not you shouldn't be wanting to escape from your life. You should be ideally, in an ideal world, you're okay, I'm excited to go back home. Everything is just a part of that journey rather than escaping. But vacation's great, but you just view it in that sense of connection, expansion.
Exactly, and that's the awareness, developing your consciousness to be aware of how you're developing. DC, the dependency, escapism, connection, and expansion through anything in your life. And again, it could be, most likely it's substances like food or caffeine, or, it could be, self-care habits that you do. And it's how are you using whatever you're going to start to think about for 2025? Where does it fall in this timeline? And it might feel like a job for doing that, but this is important. Being aware is important, and really reflecting and navigating these, because it does pay off and it does allow you to actually create a more meaningful habit. And so when we talk about, it's a big year, and we're talking about actually creating habits and new things, whether if it's the gym or whatever you want to do and achieve, there is actual neuroscience to, how you can actually stick with whatever you put yourself into. And there's going to be a lot of variables of why someone might stop something or begin something. But we know that there is a 25 to 30 day window of consistently doing it, of how the neuron actually begins to grow and starts to create a connection to another neuron for whatever endeavor that you're going to do. And so that's why like there is validity to like 30-day challenges, believe it or not. Like there is, but let's say for example something like Ozempic or whatever, like there could be again this phase of development, but like it's about afterward are these to keep, you still have to keep these connections wired in your nervous system. So like, for example, like with your cold plunge, right? You just did, whatever, 20 something days.
27.
Not the full, okay, 27 days of cold plunge, right? Like you develop that pattern and behavior now that for you to actually go back into something like that or come back, like you are much more likely to take the plunge more often versus how you were in the past.
I have to just stay with it. Like if I I find that like the first time, like talking about 30-day challenges, those first 30 days, those first 15 days are the hardest days. And then like it really, like going back to integration becomes so much more natural once you consistently start practicing it. And I've definitely found that with the cold. Like now it's like, I totally look forward to it as just like my daily ritual. But if I stop, it'll like, I know that if I stop, that's why I'm not going to stop, by the way. But if I stop, like I'm gonna like stray away from that path, which has helped me so much. So like once you commit to an action, once you commit to integration, it slowly starts to become so much more and more easier, and like you just feel so much better. You feel so much more like yourself.
And you just hit the nail on the head with what you just said, because with everything that we're talking about, no matter what you do, it's not going to be easy, right? Especially like if you're somebody who wants to. We see it a lot, people want to start at the gym here, but like they come in with maybe, not the highest fitness level, right? They're here for, again, that dependency and escapism at first because they know that they need to have something for their health, which is good. That can evolve to connection and expansion. But how do you come back to like within these first, 15 to 30 days of like, how do you keep coming back? And you have to have the practice of continuing awareness and reflection. Just like I talked about the steps of manifestation, like you're going to go through the feedback loop, all that, and you got to come back to the awareness reflection, which is really like your why, right? Like you said, like that this is helping you, you know how bad you want to feel good. You're repeating that, whether if you're journaling it or if you're just saying it in your head, or you're going through this mantra, you could just say it over and over. That itself is neuroplasticity of the 25 to 30 days. If you just say it to yourself every day. Every day you wake up, you say, I'm going to achieve this. I want to feel this about myself. I love myself. If you say that every day, like I have gratitude for everything that's coming my way. Every day when you wake up, that will stick, and that becomes not just a brain rewiring, it becomes a frequency. Okay. It becomes a whole new life force within your DNA that will continue to last and move on, or at least become easier to come back to if you have a hiatus, which is totally fine, right? The idea is, again, awareness. Are you aware to at least come back to it if you have a hiatus, if you knew that this is actually, this new habit or whatever you're doing is actually serving you to be a better human being? Yeah. And we should be aware of that, right? And so to finish off, just to maybe help you guys out is like, where do you start with all this? Where do I start with manifesting, thinking about the next year? And so I created these 4 pillars of health, which, we all talk about: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. But like, how do I really embody each of those pillars and start to create goals? So obviously the physical, right? It's not just, already if you come to this gym, you're doing the physical part. Part of the physical part is actually nutrition, because that plays seriously a deep role into your biology and physiology. So you got to have, for most of you, it's how do I start making nutrition habits, which you can go on Amy's nutrition group to help. But when it comes to the physical, right, being here, we have a balance of not just the exercises, but of the energy system. So we want to have high intensity, we want to have long zone 2, we want to have strength training, we want to have low intensity, just, quality movement based, things that are more longevity based. Like having a holistic, that circle approach to the physical is big. When it comes to mental, it's just like things that are going to allow you to improve your cognitive processes and your thought processes. So that way you can, when you think, you can dissociate like, is this a primal thought or is this a soul thought? Is this actually an authentic thought from a download of my higher self? So, what are things that are going to be helpful? Like journaling, writing things down, affirmations, mantras, positive self-talk, like start to create your own form, and then having some form of awareness or meditation or solitude where you can listen, or things that are going to allow you to start to rethink your cognitive processes. That really has a lot of variety depending on who you are, right? Because everyone thinks a little bit differently. Emotional is really important, and this one thing I wanted to quickly touch on is just the idea of like bonding. And I think a lot of people shy away from this. Like, I say that this one thing that came to my mind the other day was like, I think so many people are afraid to say like, I love you, right? And it's like, I get it, like saying I love you to everybody, everything, it's not realistic, but like, your friends and family, say I love you when you're done talking to them. More importantly, hug, create like a physical bond of like hugging. If you want to get the serotonin levels up, hug for 20 seconds, like you will actually have a positive effect from that. But what am I doing to actually create an emotional, heart-opening bond that allows me to feel unconditional love or the frequency of love? And then lastly, with spiritual, it's developing passions and excitement towards a purpose. So that sometimes hard, right? Sometimes we might get stuck and feel like we don't have purpose. So like, what are the tools that we can start to think about of like, how do I develop, purpose and passion in my life? And if you're really not sure, I have a group, Fitness Shaman group, where I help people kind of guide through these things to really start navigating like, where these 4 pillars are in my life, and maybe how can I start to create goals developed towards these 4 pillars.
Yeah, and just like find that, I think the best first step is really just learning to hear that inner voice, like being able to distinguish between like, this is my inner voice, this is my higher self that I'm hearing, and then this is just nervous system going bananas, be able to, and that takes time, it takes patience, it takes awareness, but that's, what guides me, and like try to find a situation where that inner voice, it should be what guides you, because you know what you need.
Well, the plunge will definitely help, because when that shocks you, when it shocks you, it shuts down, the whole go nervous system. It brings you to level, and then you get clearer messages. So, but it doesn't have to be plunging. It doesn't have to be fitness itself. It doesn't have to be quitting alcohol. But I would highly recommend maybe start with something like that, with like food and alcohol and nutrition, since you guys are already doing the fitness, and then maybe pick a self-care routine. Something that's really more allowing you to go inward versus going outward. So if you're not sure where to find accountability for this, guys, just show up here, right? The Just Show Up mantra is really the whole idea of having a holistic approach to your life and your lifestyle. So other than that, we're going to stop there. We're going to keep it a little bit more open-ended for you to start to reflect and contemplate to begin your own manifestation process, if desired, for the next year. And if not, if you want to live in the moment, great. But, still be aware, still be open, and use those 4 C's, right? That's all I got. Joe?
Happy New Year. That's it.
All right. Happy New Year, guys. All right. Let's make 2025 an amazing year. We love you guys. Keep up the awesome work, and we'll see you in class.